So I was asked to give a presentation yesterday on the mapping elements of Microsoft BI, which is a very defined field. It's kind of like the added bonus, but when you get right down to it, the key part of Microsoft BI and Excel and SharePoint is really the dashboards, the charts. I mean, that's where the meat and potatoes are of this tool. And many of the people in the audience, of course, who had no experience with this, were asking, so how do I get started? So starting with maps is not the way to go, but starting with dashboards is actually a very, very easy thing to do, and I thought I would just run through this before I head off to the office this morning. So I just cranked out this list of, come back here, this list of items I would have said are your basic instructions on how to start and complete a dashboard. Threw in a couple of the key tricks, and if you follow these, you should be able to do dashboards. So the first step, as often the most difficult step, is to get some good data. And as I talked about yesterday, and as you'd learn very quickly, good data does not look like a report. It looks like rows and columns, black and white. Anything like merged columns, anything that's attempted to turn the data into a report already will cause you grief. It's really important to understand. You need a table of data, which should be sacrosanct. You can add to it, of course, but that's the source. Then you take things, put them into dashboards, reports, graphs. And that's a very important lesson to take. First thing you're going to do, and I'll show you this in real life, is we're going to format the data as a table. A very simple step, but so important, and so many people don't do that, and it has ripples later. Creating a pivot table, that's something very easy. I also, at this stage, always add an extra column in column A because we're creating a dashboard and things should not be jammed up in the top left-hand corner. It's about visuals. Then we add some charts and graphs if we want. Then we add slicers. Then we kind of move things around on the screen, and then we adjust them for the best fit and display. So all very simple, but I'll run through a demo of that. So here's my set of data, and I extracted this from from DataBC, so it's open to anyone, so there's nothing confidential about it. It's information about health, or more specifically health practitioners, doctors, how many doctors, their age, how much they're earning, very interesting, their average, so chock full of interesting things and the types of specialties and the years. Ideal for dashboard reporting. First thing, of course, was to set this as a table. I'm using 2013 on my desktop here, but 2010 looks more or less the same. I'm sure you can find this button. It's not that hard. What this does is, and I'll just do it again even though I've already done it, it just identifies this as a table rather than a bunch of random rows and columns. Excel then can handle this as the table grows or shrinks. Anything you've built on top of it in terms of dashboards or reports will automatically adjust because you've told Excel, build it on this table, not on this set of rows and columns. So that saves you a lot of trouble in terms of updating and confidence that your updates are accurate. Next step is to create a, didn't need to do that, pivot table. Again, as you notice right away, it's identified this as a table, so it's not looking at a range of rows and columns. It says, I want the report to be on this table, which is fine. I'll go ahead and do that. This is not pivot table training, but for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's pretty basic. We're going to start with a table. So what did we say we're going to do? I don't know, fiscal year is easy, and expenditures, just to get started. I'll insert a row here right now because that way my dashboard is not being crammed up into the top right corner. You can add as many rows or columns. I mean, that's more, you can choose that later. So again, I can choose now to add any charts or graphs. Really, because say we're just going to do this simply. Yeah, and I don't need all these little buttons, so I'm going to hide all the field buttons. And I'm not going to try and adjust all of this information here just yet. This is just about basic construction. And then we're going to insert some slicers. I find it just best throw everything on the screen to start. In fact, I'm going to throw some things here that don't work just to show you what it's about. So just throw all this stuff on the screen and say, so here's my slicers, here's my chart, here's my table. Now let's see if this is starting to make some sense. Now there's some things here that don't. For example, this is a table that has numbers. doesn't really make a lot of sense as a slicer. Let's get rid of it. These other ones do make sense. So now is the time you just sit there and you start moving things around, changing their displays, locations, just thinking, how do you really think this would be most effective? Now is the time we start adjusting the slicers to say, well, this one is obviously, it's got a limited number of spaces and you don't really need that. So whenever you're doing spacers, look up on here. You now have options for under spacers. So I think, yeah, we can actually, you can kind of choose. Do you want it long, wide or skinny or tall? Really, it's a matter of your choice. But remember, think of your users. You can cram a lot of stuff into a small screen, but I don't know, I'm getting old and my eyes aren't that good anymore. So I prefer things that are a little bit larger. And we can do the same for these other boxes. I'm not going to watch or make you watch me go through all of them. In this case, it seemed a little bit of cramped, so maybe I'm going to make these boxes a little taller. That's up in the options column, of course. And when things get larger, of course, you'll have to decide how much you can kind of get on the screen. That's why we hate long labels when it comes to dashboards, because, each one, the labels do not wrap. So it has to print it out in full, so ideally the labels will be small. So going back to our list, we've pretty much covered all the items. I mean, we're obviously not finished as yet, but there's lots of things we can do. But we've covered the first 7 steps. Now, a couple of key tips. Actually, I was talking with our Microsoft rep, and of course this is one that, people always hit when they realize there's these couple of key steps that people normally hit when they're doing this on their own, and that really drive you crazy. For example, pivot tables by default will auto-fit as you change the content. So what that will do is shrink the table, which means everything on your screen is now all screwed up. So what you need to do is make sure the table is set not to do that. And you do that under the pivot table analyze function. It's under your pivot table options. That key button, do not uncheck the auto-fit. So I know Microsoft, and it's trying to be helpful, if your table's small, I'll shrink it. In this case, because everything is very important where I've put it, I don't want the table to change. So no matter what I pick, how much data is being displayed, there's always this space for that pivot table remains fixed. Even though there's less data in it, the actual space and the width. So everything I put around it will stay in place. And that is a very important step. The other key one, which is really important for slicers, are not essential, like in some ways it may be, but it really adds convenience, and I think it just looks better. For example, if you look at the median age being displayed here, you'll notice that it's told me, how many of these fall into this year, but it's put those to the top, and now the numbers are all out of sequence. So again, it's just sorting the relevant ones to the top. But since I can see all of them at the same time, I don't need it to sort. I prefer it if it just left it, because I think the visual display is better. So again, one of those key buttons under, right-click on your slicer or pick Settings and Show Items with No Data Last, uncheck. So now when I pick that item, it leaves them as they are. So I think that just gives me a better overall sense. It's conveying more information visually than it would if it sorted it, because now I can sort of see, oh, it's kind of scattered. Oh, we've got a good coverage of age. I don't know. So that may be conveying meaningful information for free. In cases where you have longer lists, and in this case I can make it big enough so I don't, but let's say I didn't, then I would probably leave it to sort just on its own. For example, if I shrink that up, I say that's all the space I have, I actually want it to be sorting things to the top. Because if not, there may be a selection down there. For example, I don't know if I can see all the selections on my screen. I may have to scroll down to find them all. So in this sense, it's better to have them all just punting to the top. But again, part of that's the key decision you have to make. So we're now down to the step where you could start thinking about this product as a dashboard. And of course, as I mentioned at my presentation, and really a dashboard should not look like an Excel screen. In fact, if someone sees a dashboard on your screen, they should not be able to tell that it's Excel. If I can see anything that tells me it's Excel, then you've not done a high quality dashboard. They still work and they're fine for, but again, if we want to make this a really professional product, then you really want to kind of remove all the things that would suggest that it's anything other than a dashboard. So again, get rid of the headers, get rid of the grid lines. Now obviously you'd be putting a title on this somewhere. I can auto hide the the toolbar, so that really now this is just a dashboard. You have no idea what I could be using some fancy schmancy tool to do this, but no, it's just Excel. And really, when people come to use this, they shouldn't be thinking that they're in Excel. That gives, I don't know, for some reason that makes them nervous. Like this is just like going onto Google, going onto a website, and I'm just making selections. We do this all the time when we shop, when we're looking for things. So this is exactly how it should look. Now, there's still some things to be done here to make it final by all, but this is going to be, if you can do this much, after this, it's really just a question of, final tweaking. So for example, I just did this one, but clearly you'd be able to do the same. I've made choices about colors. There are some more advanced features you can get into, but maybe that's something you want to leave for a little bit. Now my plan was to keep this video under 15 minutes, so since I still have 4 minutes, you're more than welcome to leave at this point or carry on, and I'll show you a couple of the more, call them advanced features, but I do think they kind of are desirable and not that hard to learn. Slicers, of course, come in default mode, default colors. Up here in the options column, you will find you have choices. Microsoft has defaults for you already. I built some custom ones, but we'll ignore those for now. So you can choose to alter the generic color of the slicer. Again, more about visual convenience and display. I mean, you don't want to go too psychedelic here, but I think colors can be meaningful in terms of if there's groups of slicers that are similar, maybe they should be the same color. So that's something that doesn't take a lot of effort. It's just pick the defaults. Now I have a separate training YouTube up specifically on how to customize slicers. And in fact, I believe it's my most popular posting because that is one of the things that you'd never in a million years guess how to do it. And it's very difficult to do initially. Once you know how to do it, it's fine, but it took me a long time to actually find how to do this. You'll notice, of course, that every slicer is up here. If you right-click on it, you'd say, I like this slicer, but I'd like to change it. Well, first thing is you duplicate it. This actually lists all of the possible features you could have on any slicer. This is just one slicer. How it reacts. So what happens if I push the slicer button and there's data? What happens to that cell? What happens to the ones that don't have data? Literally, you can format each possible item in terms of color, shape, and size for every slicer, which I wouldn't even want to guess how many possibilities there are. So you can really go to town on this if you want to. May not be what you want to do to start with, though. But I'll show an example of what I did on that. So here's a dashboard I did up on, a bit more finalized. May not even be perfectly final, but it's looking a little bit more presentable. So again, all the slicers are here. I've made choices about sizes and shapes. I created a custom filter here. I just like that. Okay, nice yellow border. I said I want bigger fonts. I said if I push the button and there's data, it stays there. The ones that are not involved should turn green. Okay, that's fine. And if I select something and there's no relevant information, they should turn orange. So again, you can see the various options you have. And like I say, the possibilities are endless. It really comes down to you deciding often what things do you want to pop on the screen. If you've got a lot of filters and they're all the same sizes and shapes and colors, things don't necessarily jump out. You may want to think, what's the important data you want? Maybe that's the filter that you sort of spend some time making a little bit more visually appealing. And in that case, you choose what you want. Too much color may be distracting. I mean, I put a background image in this just because I get tired of looking at blank screens, but I can just as easily blow that away. You could just put a, different color palette in the background. That's just one of those final features you want to tweak. So this product is ready. It could be shared with anyone, and I'll just actually put this file up as an Excel file for those that have 2010. You're free to use it. You then have a direct query portal on this information that comes from a corporate source. I'm assuming it's valid. This tells you the expenditures and the number of doctors by year, by median age. You can multi-pick if you like. You can see how things, what professions they're in. I actually found it quite interesting to look at myself. I presume people in healthcare would have more understanding of the information of what this means and why sometimes those lines are very consistent versus not. But again, it's just giving you access to the data. I think this would be too cluttered to post in SharePoint myself. Too much stuff going on here. I'd want to restrict this. If it's on my desktop, I'm happy to do more. Now I see I've gone over my 15-minute time limit, so I'm going to wrap it up here. But this gives you a good sense of how to start. And if you can kind of do those basics, I don't think you'll have any problem. Things will just go from there. And when in doubt, YouTube is your friend. You can always find someone who's done some posting on whatever it is you want to learn. Cheers.